Genocide. The very mention of the word should give pause, catch in the throat, cause a shudder. After the wholesale destruction of 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe and scores of others deemed as somehow less than human, the world stood aghast and said, "Never again." And after that never again was so clearly and emphatically stated, Sri Lanka, Guatemala, Bangladesh, Uganda, Burundi, Cambodia, Indonesia, Iraq, Somalia, Bosnia, Rwanda, Zaire, North Kivu, Northern Iraq, and Syria, Darfur, Myanmar, and the Uyghur Autonomous Region of China. These last three on this list are ongoing. They are happening now. Never again is still ringing hollow in our world in 2021. I started the preceding list with those after the Holocaust because I want to be respectful of time. But before we puff our Western chests out too much about faraway places and so-called primitive cultures, I would urge my colleagues to look up the California genocide and numerous other examples in history of the systematic destruction of indigenous populations by those who are so enlightened and so civilized as to find coexistence and inconvenience. Genocide has visited every corner of the globe. What has it been like to live as a Uyghur Muslim in the so-called Uyghur Autonomous Region of China since 2017? Constant surveillance and interrogation, millions detained in forced re-education camps, coerced abortions, and forced sterilizations. Forced sterilizations alone up 600% over a 2-year period. Forced labor many miles from home villages. Forced renouncing of religion and a loyalty pledge to the Chinese Communist Party. Physical, mental abuse, sexual torture. Does this still seem far away? We in the West have no utility in the matter. Consider this. 80% of the cotton products made in China originate in the Uyghur region, which is presently subjugated under forced labor policies. Consider this. According to the New York Times, 17 of the 51 Chinese companies in the now flourishing PPE, we all know that word well now, supply chain utilized forced labor in the production of protective equipment, some of which made it back into the United States. Garments and masks and filters have reached our shore, made by hands in bondage. Genocide. What does one more resolution matter? I would argue a great deal. Awareness, rippling out, one more post on social media, one more thoughtful conversation seeking understanding for those still open to such quaint concepts. One more opportunity for exposure of any remaining corporate interests who look the other way as 80,000 Uyghur laborers are exploited in factories after forced relocation, or the 500,000 who toil at forced labor in cotton fields. One more annoyance to those in foreign policy circles who constantly preach pragmatism in the face of grievous human rights violations. Forced awake by the multitude of voices joined in appeal of urgency and warning. One more moment of discernment by a consumer at the human cost of cheaper goods with that ubiquitous made in sticker, tag, or seal. One more prayer. I mentioned awareness. Secrecy is the favored tool universally of authoritarian regimes, and sunlight and transparency are the enemy of authoritarianism in all of its form. Genocide is happening to the Uyghur Muslim minority in China, and I appreciate it having been characterized as such by our current U.S. Secretary of State and our immediate past U.S. Secretary of State. Bring forth the sunlight, call this travesty out for what it is, and share this reality with others. This resolution is not a condemnation of the Chinese people. It is very much a condemnation of the authoritarian communist dictatorship governing China, a regime which has a well-established pattern of violation of human rights and exportation of the commercial results of that exploitation, whether it be toys contaminated by lead paint, dangerous and toxic construction materials, and now garments and protective equipment made by a state-persecuted religious minority who have no rights as to their religion, their culture, their location, their labor, their household, or even the basic assurance of progeny and a family tree. Will we listen to the plight of the Uyghur Muslims, striving to preserve their cultural identity, faith traditions? Or will we fall into the easy pragmatism of international diplomacy and the ever-present hand-washing of other considerations? Genocide. Congress must pass and President Biden must sign the reintroduced Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act to ensure that all goods manufactured in the Uyghur province are considered as made with forced labor, while also disclosing all suppliers and companies utilizing such labor. This action will further demand changes and transparency from the authoritarian Chinese government, while concurrently exploring other avenues for action and international condemnation, which will, I pray, lead to a cessation of this abhorrent behavior in all of its forms. The resolution is available for co-sponsorship on the electronic calendar. I urge support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.